What if the rosary you trust the most is quietly disrupting your prayer life? In a homily that moved hearts across continents, Pope Leo XIV asked this very question, not to cause alarm, but to awaken a deeper awareness in our spiritual discipline. The rosary, he explained, is not merely an object. It is a spiritual conduit when treated with reverence. But in certain cases, it can become a source of spiritual distortion, not through superstition, but through misuse or contamination. Let us enter this reflection through three essential doors. First, to recall the profound dignity of the rosary in Catholic life. Second, to understand how objects meant for devotion can be misused or profaned. And third, to rediscover how to protect our homes with spiritual vigilance and love for Christ. But before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell to receive content that will elevate your faith and wisdom through the teachings of the Holy Pope Leo XIV. The Rosary is not decoration, nor is it a charm. It is prayer shaped into form, each bead a step closer to the mysteries of Christ. Since St. Dominic received this gift through the Virgin Mary, the Church has recognized in the Rosary a sacred chain that binds heaven to earth. Pope Leo XIV insists that this weapon, as Padre Pio called it, must be wielded with spiritual clarity. And here we must listen carefully to Padre Pio, the stigmatized priest of our times. His insights, quoted by Pope Leo XIV, remain startling. The devil is like a rabid dog tied to a chain. Stay at a distance and he cannot harm you, but step within that circle and you risk more than you can handle. One of the ways souls unknowingly step within that circle is through sacramentals acquired without discernment. Not all that looks holy is holy. In the testimony shared by Pope Leo XIV, a mother noticed a sharp decline in the peace within her home, tension, nightmares, and strange restlessness among her children. It all began after hanging a beautiful black rosary bought at an estate sale. When she removed it and replaced it with one blessed by a priest, the change was almost immediate, not because of superstition, but because the first object had a history her eyes could not see. Padre Pio, with his charism of discernment, often refused to bless certain objects. Once a woman brought what seemed to be a normal rosary. Before she could speak, Padre Pio turned away and said, "Take that away. It was not created for prayer." Further inquiry revealed it had been used in occult practices. This is not fiction. And the Church does not invent spiritual battles to frighten the faithful. The Catechism reminds us that sacramentals, when used with faith, prepare us to receive grace and dispose us to cooperate with it. But objects are not neutral when misused. They can become spiritually incoherent, even harmful. Pope Leo XIV speaks to this generation with urgency. In a world where spiritual things are commercialized, where rosaries are sold as jewelry and bought without prayer, Catholics must return to reverent awareness. Black rosaries, blood-red rosaries, and hybrid rosaries blending foreign symbols with Christian form are not inherently evil. But when their origin is impure, their use becomes spiritually confusing. St. Pio saw how objects absorb the intentions behind them. A rosary used in rituals foreign to Christ, even if beautiful, does not carry the grace of the Church. Instead, it echoes its previous misuse. The black rosary, often associated with mourning in Catholic tradition, was adopted by occult groups, precisely because it absorbs and conceals spiritual energy. Padre Pio warned that these could become repositories of spiritual interference. The same must be said of deep red rosaries. While red symbolizes martyrdom and the blood of Christ, not every red rosary on the market shares that sacred heritage. Some were crafted in the context of blood rituals, distorting the very image of sacrifice. Even more troubling to Pope Leo XIV are rosaries designed to appear inclusive, colorful, filled with crystal-like beads or embedded with symbols. Foreign to the faith, they create what Padre Pio called spiritual static, a blurred signal between the soul and God. Prayer, he said, must be a clean channel. When the tools of prayer are confused, the fruit of prayer is compromised. Now more than ever, the Church calls her children to vigilance, not fear, but prudence. How can the faithful discern what is spiritually healthy? Pope Leo XIV offers 6 signs, drawn from Padre Pio's own guidance. First, examine the Rosary's origin. If it came from an unknown or second-hand source, seek a blessing. Second, pay attention during prayer. If using a specific rosary brings anxiety or dryness, take note. Third, observe its design. Strange symbols or eye-shaped beads are not part of Christian devotion. Fourth, look at the materials. Bones, crystals associated with non-Christian spirituality, and certain metals carry unknown histories. Fifth, trust the inner promptings of the Holy Spirit. If a rosary gives you unease, do not dismiss it. Lastly, examine your prayer life. If the rosary becomes a block instead of a bridge to God, this may be more than psychological. All these warnings return us to one truth. The heart of the rosary is the heart of Mary, pointing us to Christ. Nothing can replace purity of intention, clarity of faith, and reverent use of sacred things. An essential point raised by Pope Leo XIV is that spiritual interference rarely begins with the spectacular. It often emerges subtly, like a fog that enters through an open window and settles without notice. He reminds us, the evil. One prefers the unnoticed disruption. He does not always shout, he whispers. Many homes today carry burdens not from what is visible, but from what is tolerated unconsciously. Objects meant to lead to God can, when profaned or misused, confuse, rather than clarify the path. Padre Pio repeatedly warned that spiritual influences can attach themselves not only to persons, but to things, particularly when those things are created or used in contexts contrary to the gospel. Pope Leo XIV highlights several cases in which families experienced a heavy atmosphere in their homes, sudden mood changes, unnecessary arguments, unexplained anxieties, or insomnia among children. These were not random occurrences. In many such stories, the presence of a particular rosary, acquired casually or inherited without question, coincided with the beginning of spiritual disorder. A particularly vivid case comes from a family who had received an antique red rosary as a gift. Its beauty was striking, and they placed it above the family altar. Within weeks, the father began to exhibit unusual aggression. The children struggled with sleep, the peace that once defined. Their home faded into tension. When they consulted a priest familiar with Padre Pio's legacy, his first question was, "Have you introduced any new religious objects into your home recently?" That simple question led to a powerful act of cleansing. They removed the rosary and blessed the home. Slowly, peace returned. This is not to say that every discomfort is caused by a rosary. Pope Leo XIV is clear. Discernment must never be replaced by fear. But awareness is part of wisdom, and wisdom is the language of the Spirit. Hybrid rosaries, those with crystals, symbols of other religions, or beads shaped like eyes, are especially problematic. Not because the materials themselves are inherently evil, but because their symbolism introduces contradiction into the object. The rosary is meant to proclaim one truth: Jesus Christ is Lord, through Mary, his mother. Any item that confuses, that proclamation, even unintentionally, creates disorder in prayer. Pope Leo XIV teaches that this confusion becomes a kind of spiritual static. Like a radio struggling to find the right frequency, the soul senses a disruption. This might manifest in distractions, anxiety, or a strange resistance to prayer. Some describe it as a sudden loss of desire to pray the rosary at all. When that happens, the Pope urges, we must investigate the tools we are using, not with paranoia, but with pastoral caution. He then offers a theological reflection rooted in the Church's tradition. Sacramentals do not function automatically. Their power is not mechanical. They operate through the faith of the Church and the intention of the user. An unblessed rosary, however beautiful, is not yet a channel of grace. A rosary used with impure intention, even if later blessed, may still carry a kind of spiritual residue. This is why the Church teaches not only to bless new objects, but to dispose of those that are spiritually compromised with reverence. Pope Leo XIV explains, returning such objects to the elements is not superstition. It is respect. Burn them or bury them, always with prayer, acknowledging their intended purpose and asking God to nullify any distortion. He emphasizes three foundations for acquiring a rosary: origin, blessing, and intention. First, origin. Choose rosaries made by religious communities, faithful artisans, or from trusted Catholic sources. Second, blessing. Never use a rosary that has not been blessed. Ask a priest after Mass and treat the blessing as a moment of grace, not routine. Third, intention. Always begin your use of a rosary with prayer, dedicating it to the glory of God and the intercession of Our Lady. Some might object, is this not too cautious? Pope Leo XIV answers with a pastoral smile. No act of reverence is ever wasted, he says. When it comes to prayer, clarity is not legalism, it is love. He recounts the story of a young seminarian who had collected many rosaries. Over the years, most of them gifts from well-meaning friends. He kept them on his wall, more as decoration than devotion. But after a time, his prayer life became dry. He struggled to focus, even during liturgy. In confession, he mentioned this. Interior fog. The priest asked a single question. Have you consecrated the things in your room to God? That question began a journey. The seminarian reviewed each rosary, prayed over them, removed those that seemed questionable, and had the others blessed anew. The change was not dramatic, but it was real. His heart found peace again. This is the pattern Pope Leo XIV wants every Catholic to rediscover. Holiness begins at home, not only in what we do, but in what we keep near us. The objects in our lives should lead us to the sacraments, not away from them. A rosary is not a magic charm. It is a spiritual instrument. But like any instrument, it must be in tune. If this message is speaking to your heart, take a moment now to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This simple act could be the light in your life today, guided by the wisdom of Pope Leo XIV. There is a particular wisdom Pope Leo XIV teaches in listening to the smallest voices in our homes. Not just the words of children, but their behavior, their sleep, their silence. Children are often the first to feel what adults overlook. This is not mystical exaggeration. It is a truth confirmed by centuries of Catholic experience. The innocent are sensitive to spiritual atmospheres. Padre Pio once remarked that pets and children react first to what is spiritually wrong in a household. A child who avoids one room, a dog that growls without cause near a particular shelf. These may seem trivial, but as Pope Leo XIV reminds us, spiritual things often announce themselves gently, but they leave deep marks. In many testimonies shared by priests close to Padre Pio, homes that suffered persistent unrest, a sense of gloom, chronic tension, or spiritual coldness, often had one common factor: a compromised religious item, present and unnoticed. A rosary on a shelf, a crucifix with symbols no one understood. A beautiful object, yes, but spiritually broken. The Holy Father is careful to clarify, no object has more power than the grace of Christ. But he warns, grace does not act where faith is absent. We must not treat sacred items like superstitions, he says, But neither can we ignore their spiritual dimension. The Rosary is not neutral. It is holy, or it is distorted. Sleep. Disturbance is one of the first signs. Insomnia without reason, children waking with fear. Nightmares that begin only after placing a certain item in the room. These symptoms are rarely linked to what is on the nightstand, but they should be. Pope Leo XIV encourages all Catholics to bring their homes into prayer. That means opening every room to the light of Christ, not just in theory, but in action. This spiritual openness includes examining what we bring into our homes. Was this rosary blessed? Do we know where it came from? Does it carry symbols or energies from other beliefs? These are not secondary questions. They touch on spiritual safety. One woman who corresponded with Padre Pio shared that her family had become strangely distant. Arguments rose quickly. Even her own prayer felt heavy, lifeless. A visiting friend who was deeply prayerful felt something strange when standing near a particular display of rosaries in the hallway. She couldn't explain it, but she felt uneasy. That small comment led the woman to remove all the rosaries she had purchased online, mostly for decoration. After replacing them with one simple Blessed Rosary, the spiritual climate changed. Pope Leo XIV explains this through a powerful analogy. Just as mold grows in darkness, spiritual confusion festers in places not exposed to the light of prayer. When an object in our home carries a contradictory spiritual past, it is like a mirror reflecting the wrong light. It may not speak, but it speaks to the soul. This is why he insists. Catholics must reclaim their homes as places of grace, not just by what we avoid, but by what we actively consecrate. The family crucifix, holy water at the door, a blessed rosary at the bedside. These are not decorations, they are signs of covenant, instruments of God's protection. Pope Leo XIV gives a simple and pastoral process to anyone unsure about a rosary in their possession. First, pray with it. Do you feel drawn to God or distracted? Second, have it blessed, again, if needed. Third, if unease persists, set it aside and speak with a priest. And fourth, if advised, dispose of it properly by burning or burial after prayer. Importantly, he emphasizes, do not fear these items, but neither ignore the signs. Fear belongs to the enemy, the Pope says. Discernment belongs to the saints. For households experiencing deep spiritual unrest, he advises a full spiritual reset. Invite a priest to bless the home. Organize a prayer corner. Place a crucifix where it can be seen. Use incense or holy water regularly. Most importantly, pray the rosary daily, out loud as a family if possible. Because the rosary, when prayed rightly, becomes a light that no shadow can overcome. One story particularly moved Pope Leo XIV. A young couple recently married were devoted Catholics, but found themselves constantly arguing, even over trivial matters. They prayed, confessed, attended Mass, yet peace eluded them. When they examined their home, they found a rosary gifted to them by a distant relative, a beautiful multicolored design with strange symbols on the cross. Neither had ever used it for prayer. It was just there, resting on the shelf. When they removed it and replaced it with a traditional wooden rosary, blessed by a priest, the shift was visible. First in their prayer, then in their unity. This is not magic, it is faith. What Pope Leo XIV asks is simple. Treat what is holy as holy. This includes vigilance over what enters your home in the name of faith. A rosary should never confuse the senses or compete with secular designs. It should speak clearly of Christ and Mary, nothing more, nothing less. He concludes this teaching with a reflection drawn from St. Paul. Let all things be done for building up. If a rosary tears down peace, interrupts prayer, or clouds the soul, it may be time to let it go. Once the fog of confusion is lifted, Pope Leo XIV insists we must not stop at removing the problem. We must go further, re-establish the sacred. In every generation, the Church has taught that places can be claimed for God. Homes, especially, should not be neutral spaces. They are the domestic churches, the first altar of Christian life. This restoration begins with prayer, but also with structure. Pope Leo XIV encourages every Catholic household to establish a dedicated space for prayer, not merely symbolic, but intentional. A crucifix, a simple image of Our Lady, a blessed candle, and a single traditional rosary. These form the spiritual anchor of a home. More than arrangement, what matters is consecration. That is why the Pope advises calling a priest to bless the home, not just the rooms, but the relationships within. The blessing of a house is a priestly act, invoking Christ's authority over the physical and spiritual dimensions of the space. When done with faith, it creates a perimeter of peace. In homes that have suffered from spiritual confusion, tension, nightmares, persistent division, this blessing is not optional. It is essential. Pope Leo XIV also recommends something he calls the spiritual shield. This is not a mystical formula, but a simple practice rooted in the Church's heritage. Place a crucifix above the main door. Keep holy water near the entrance. In each bedroom, keep a single blessed item, a crucifix or a traditional rosary. These visible signs remind every soul who enters. This home belongs to Christ. To parents, he speaks with special urgency. Children do not only inherit your genetics, he says, they inherit your atmosphere. A home saturated in grace becomes a shelter. A home cluttered with confused devotions becomes a fog. That is why he invites all families to rediscover the daily rosary, not as routine, but as rain. Each decade prayed is like a stone set into the walls of the house, fortifying it against spiritual erosion. He recalls the example of St. John Paul II, who often said the rosary shaped his entire priesthood. The repetition, the meditation, the physical act of holding the beads, it integrates body and soul into the mysteries of Christ. But again, this only happens when the rosary is clear in its identity and origin. The Pope warns against turning the rosary into an accessory. To wear the rosary without praying it is like wearing armor with no war to fight. Worse, some wear it for style, stripping it of its spiritual identity. The Church does not forbid the wearing of the rosary, but it urges reverence. Let the rosary rest on the heart, not the neck. Let it be prayed, not displayed. He shares the story of a high school student who wore a large, multicolored rosary as a fashion piece. Her faith was sincere, but undefined. Over time, she began to feel distant in prayer, distracted, confused. A religious sister gently asked her about the rosary's origin. It had come from a New Age boutique filled with other spiritual tools. The sister gave her a plain wooden rosary, blessed it, and taught her to pray 1 decade each day. The change was quiet but steady. Her joy returned. This is what Pope Leo XIV means when he says, objects are not neutral. They either point toward Christ or they don't. In dealing with rosaries that trouble the spirit, the Church provides clear paths. If the rosary is questionable but not disturbing, it can be blessed and kept. If it causes unease, it should be set aside, prayed over, and discussed with a trusted priest. If it bears occult symbols, contradicts Catholic iconography, or was acquired in a place opposed to the faith, it should not be kept. When disposal is needed, the method must reflect respect. Rosaries that have been blessed should never be thrown away. Pope Leo XIV affirms the traditional practice: burn or bury them with a prayer. A short prayer of thanksgiving and renunciation suffices. What matters is the intention, to close the door opened by confusion and reopen the one through which grace enters. The Pope also offers a final reminder: not every rosary must be elaborate to be powerful. In fact, he often encourages the faithful to seek the simplest kinds, wooden beads, small crosses made by religious hands. These carry within them the quiet strength of prayerful creation. They are crafted not in factories, but in silence. And silence, he reminds us, is the native language of God. He calls this the theology of simplicity, a reminder that the more humble an object, the more room it leaves for God to act through it. The Rosary, at its heart, is not about color or material. It is about communion. Communion with Mary, who leads us always to her Son. In closing this reflection, Pope Leo XIV offers one final encouragement. If you have never dedicated your home to Christ, now is the time. Do not wait for a problem to appear. Do not assume everything is well because nothing is visibly wrong. Create a sanctuary now. Prepare the walls of your dwelling to echo with the rhythm of prayer. The sacred is not a feeling, it is a decision. When a home is made holy, it does not become perfect, but it becomes protected. That is the promise the Church offers when we take seriously the instruments of devotion that surround us. In the final portion of this teaching, Pope Leo XIV returns to the heart of the matter. The Rosary, when used with faith and clarity, remains one of the most powerful spiritual weapons in the hands of the Church. But like all weapons, it must be handled with knowledge, reverence, and intention. The Pope reminds us that Padre Pio often said, "The Rosary is the weapon for these times, not a decoration, not an accessory, not a collector's item, but a weapon, and every weapon demands training. That training begins with discernment. If the Rosary in your possession has brought unease, division, or spiritual dryness, do not panic. Begin with prayer. Ask the Holy Spirit to illuminate the history of that object. Examine its symbols, materials, and origin. Speak to a priest. Invite the Church to walk this path with you, not alone, but in communion. For many Catholics, this journey will be healing. It will restore purpose and clarity to their prayer life. For others, it may require letting go of objects they once cherished. But Pope Leo XIV assures us, letting go of what confuses your soul is not loss. It is obedience, and obedience always bears fruit. He shares a moving testimony. A widower, elderly and devout, kept a collection of rosaries his wife had gathered over decades. Among them was one that disturbed him without explanation. He never used it, but kept it for memory. After listening to a homily on spiritual discernment, he finally brought the item to a priest. The priest blessed it again, but felt compelled to recommend its burial. That night, the widower described his first peaceful sleep in months. Peace, Pope Leo XIV explains, is the clearest sign of grace restored. The Pope also offers an important note to those in ministry, catechists, priests, youth leaders. Teach the faithful about sacramentals. Do not assume they know. Many Catholics today, even the devout, confuse magical thinking with devotional life. They collect objects without formation. They bless nothing. They pray seldom. And in that void, spiritual confusion grows. He challenges every Catholic household. Renew your relationship with the Rosary, not just in form, but in spirit. Choose one. Bless it. Pray it. Let it become part of your spiritual rhythm, not as a task, but as a grace. The Pope reflects deeply on the words of St. Louis de Montfort, who called the Rosary a mystical rose tree. Each Hail Mary, he said, is a petal, each decade a flower offered to Mary. But what kind of flowers are we offering when the Rosary is confused in its purpose, when it carries other spirits, foreign meanings, or commercial intentions? The flower withers. But the good news is it can bloom again, and this is the hope Pope Leo XIV leaves us with, not fear, not shame, but renewal. A renewed Rosary life renews the home. A renewed home strengthens the family. A strong family renews the Church. and a renewed church becomes again the light of the world. He also reminds us, no object has more power than Christ. If you have used a rosary that may be spiritually compromised, remember, God's mercy restores all things. Bring it to the light. Bring it to the church. Let the hands of the priest, acting in the name of Christ, consecrate again what was misused. Above, all the Pope calls every Catholic back to simplicity. In a time of spiritual noise, choose silence. In a time of decorative faith, choose depth. In a time of confusion, choose clarity. This is what the Rosary demands, not just repetition, but devotion. Not just beads, but belief. As he closes this catechesis, Pope Leo XIV speaks not as a scholar, but as a father. The devil, he says, cannot enter where Mary is welcomed. And Mary enters through prayer, through the Rosary. Prayed with love and focus. When we pray it, we do not merely recite words. We invite heaven into our homes, and so he leaves 3 final invitations. First, go now and examine the rosaries in your home, not with fear, but with discernment. Second, choose one, simple, blessed, rooted in the Church, and begin again. 1 decade, 1 mystery, 1 day at a time. Third, teach others, especially the young. Do not let the next generation inherit confusion. Let them inherit clarity. Let them see the Rosary as what it truly is, a lifeline to Christ through the hands of Mary. If you do this, Pope Leo XIV promises, your home will not simply be protected, it will become a wellspring of grace, not because of the objects themselves, but because of the prayer that surrounds them, not because of the beads, but because of the mystery they proclaim, and not because of your strength, but because of your surrender to God. This is the path of authentic devotion. This is the wisdom of the saints. And this, says the Pope, is the light the world needs now more than ever. If this message deepened your faith or brought clarity to your spiritual journey, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Help us spread the teachings of the Holy Pope Leo XIV to more souls seeking light and truth.